So what Armin just said to me dovetails nicely with the introduction to my sermon, in that what I was about to say is that if there is a problem, then you have to name the problem and also accept that you are powerless over a particular problem before you can begin to manage that problem. Armin has just said that they gave out bulletins from last Sunday to a bunch of people, so we're naming the problem now. And if you need a bulletin for this Sunday, please raise your hand, and Armin will happily deliver one to you. So I was responding to Jesus' line in verse 19 from the Gospel of Luke, which it turns out may not be in some of your bulletins, where Jesus says to the Samaritan, "Get up and go on your way, your faith has made you well." And I am really querying what my faith making me well looks like in 2017 with respect to a particular problem. You have to name the problem. You have to admit that you're powerless over a problem, that the problem has become unmanageable before you can begin to become well. And so I begin by naming some problems. And one of the problems that I wish to name this morning is that sometimes the Bible is wrong. I'm not sure if I've ever said it exactly that way from the pulpit before. I'm sure I've hinted at it plenty of times, but I think it's true. Sometimes the Bible is wrong. Today I was going to speak about the many blessings one might find in different corners of the church around the globe, how we are a better people because our way is not the only way, and I hope that might have been fairly worshipful or interesting or faithful. But you know, I've really been working through over and over and over again this thing that I cannot shake, which is that I don't know what to say about the church anymore. I don't know what to say about the church universal and how we respond as a church anymore. Not when pastors are writing letters in defense of sexual misconduct or abuse in Alabama and are railing away about how badly white Christian American men are persecuted. I'm also aware that as we focus more on the issues of misogyny and sexual misconduct and patriarchy in our own society, the Church Universal has not been the institution in general terms by which one may turn for inspiration or solutions. So the church has been every bit as wrong as much as the Bible was and is wrong every time it gave us a sense that women were property of a man or less than and gave no value judgment about that. Of course, the Bible is a product of its time, and one must parse through all the ways in which a text is rooted to a culture and a time and a place, and that in itself doesn't make it wrong. But it's wrong to speak of many women in the Bible and simply accept their situation without commentary. It is similarly wrong to not more strenuously advocate for the pastoral epistle problem, that the books of 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy and Titus in the New Testament, which are written in Paul's name and contain the words, "Women should not speak in church," that there is no chance that those words were actually written by Paul, wherein they say these things about women being silent in church, and by which many of us preachers either let that issue of authorship go or put Paul's name in quotation marks, or we hem and we haw about the issue and let things slide. Well, it's interesting that those books were let into the biblical canon. That doesn't make it moral or right in any capacity. Those who formulated what books should go in the Bible were wrong. And so church has been wrong, and church history has been wrong, and the Bible can get things wrong. And pastors today and preachers and teachers and lay people all around the world are wrong about the ways in which gender should be taught about and spoken of and lived out if women become anything less than equal. And I know I don't know the answers. What I do know is that to have a fuller understanding of who or what God is and what my ultimate allegiances are and where they lie, I have to free myself from the need for the church to be right or for the Bible to always be right, and instead define allegiances and my colors and my faith in a way that allows for truth and love and freedom and beauty to be found in the Bible and in church and in the world and in other cultures and in other faith systems, while also giving honor to the way in which I come to understand my journey with God, which unfolds here in this community of faith. The blessing is to see love being practiced in certain corners of the world, whether they are Christian or not, and also celebrate the blessings that we have right here. But we have a problem, and it is something over which we may feel we have little power. And the problem has become unmanageable, to quote the first step of the 12 steps, and to quote the second. We need God to help us, restore us to sanity. While the Bible is wrong about some things, we may also see great beauty in today's text, though. Jesus is in the region between Samaria and Galilee. Jesus is a Galilean who happens upon a community of lepers who are outside the normal boundaries, so to speak. They have to fend for themselves and beg for charity or scavenge for their own food. Surely it's not a coincidence that there are 10 of them. 10 lepers here in this community. 10 is a special number in Judaism, as it says in Torah that this number can form a minyan, a quorum, enough people to hold services in a synagogue. This is a way of saying that this community of lepers who are on the boundary is a worshiping community all to itself, formed by a common bond of sickness and ostracism. We also know that given the location and the responses by both Jesus and the Samaritan, that this is a mixed community of Samaritans and Galileans, two communities who have traditionally had great enmity for one another. The parable of the Good Samaritan is one of the most famous passages in the Bible, but I have suspected that that story, rather than being a call to do good, is also a call from whom we are willing to accept help. If you were the one in the ditch, would you take the hand of a Samaritan, Jesus asks? Would you let that guy help you? Would you let that guy show you hospitality? The two groups had different ancestors. Galileans traced their lineage back to the tribe of Naphtali, and the Samaritans back to Joseph. The Samaritans, adherents of Samaritanism, which is an Abrahamic religion related to Judaism, but certainly not the same thing. Samaritans claimed that their worship was the true religion of ancient Israelites prior to the Babylonian exile, preserved by those who remained in the land of Israel, while Jews like the Galileans maintained the traditions while they were forced into exile. And only the traditions for Jews are the valid ones are the ones shaped by the exile experience. So I am tantalized by this idea that Galilean and Samaritan lepers had formed a community together, that they were able to overcome their national history and their boundaries because they faced this stigma of being lepers together. So as Jesus comes along and offers them this blessing and tells them to go to the priests, and their community, this community of 10 lepers, is suddenly broken apart. Because we might assume that the Galileans have gone off to find their Jewish priests, leaving the Samaritan or the Samaritans to go find his Samaritan priest. The link in the community, the one of physical sickness and emotional separation, has now become broken as they are healed. And so the text leads us to another question, another really critical question. It's unspoken, but the text is asking, now that these men have been physically healed and they don't have to live on the border apart from everyone else, does this now mean that they will regain their distaste for each other as Jews and Samaritans? Is their bond now dissolved? And their nationality and their tribalism will once again take precedence over the former bond of co-suffering and support for each other. The question of how these bonds are formed is particularly pertinent these days. Nationalism is coming in waves all around the world, especially in Europe. And there's something unresolved in much of the conversation about what it means to belong to a country. Because often it is not clear which guiding principles are in play depending on the country that you are discussing. How are nations formed? Is a country formed around ideals and principles laid out in a constitution? Or do people gather around a common heritage, a common understanding of what it is to be something? Did a country begin around a common heritage? In England, one might say, and I'm using that because of my own heritage, I'm English, you're English, we speak English, we look English, whatever that's supposed to mean. We might say that we know what that means. I'm white, I'm short, I've got brown hair, I've got a chip on my shoulder, a stiff upper lip, all of that. I'm a descendant probably of the Normans or the Saxons or some other particular tribe in that particularity. So later a constitution comes along, it's developed that says something along the lines of all English people, no matter what religion they belong to or no matter what they look like, have the same rights and the same duties. And so the Constitution says that the nation is to gather around common ideals rather than that common heritage. And we see how toxic this is when there is disagreement about the purpose of a modern nation, and that purpose isn't articulated or is refused by a section of the community. Guiding principles are fundamentally important, and without agreement about those principles, factions appear and seek to wrest control from each other. We find a community that is gathered around a common need more than a shared heritage in this text. Jesus leads us to a place to wonder what happens to that bond built around a common need if you're no longer sick. All around this world, people gather together in support groups, and recovery groups, and religious groups, quite apart from their national identities and quite apart from a shared heritage, to instead speak of a bond formed from a particular problem or concern or issue or experience. And so if I'm to speak of highest allegiances this morning on the week of Thanksgiving, can we speak of a common bond that trumps nationality and is bound to trump nearly anything else or perhaps everything else? If you have a son or a daughter or a spouse and you're going to spend some time together this week, can you talk to them, if it does not put you in a compromising or difficult position, about what is happening, what has happened in our toxic culture of misogyny? I have a tendency to speak from my own experience like this isn't opening up some wounds for people that I know, and I know that that can't be true. I also know that I don't know very much, that my ignorance is really quite profound. I, as a guy, remain surprised by how unsurprised the few women I've spoken to are about all of the news these days. And so I, a guy, wonder what I might say to my 7-year-old daughter about all of this. And that's when you realize that it's better to shut up and listen sometimes, because my spouse interjected the other day when we spoke about this and asked me what I might also say to our son. Because we can talk about taking our daughter to self-defense classes all day long, and we can warn her in 1,000 different ways, but that is not even getting to half of the issue. It seems to me as a guy that while some women are saying that women right now are having a moment, I, as a man, sure wish we were having a moment too. That's the thing with hard conversations and difficult moments and tough epiphanies, and where Lindsay and AJ began this morning with difficult Thanksgivings. It is tough to acknowledge that we aren't well, and we have not been well for a long time. Recovery is built around the knowledge that the problem has flitted through our fingers as men, and we cannot manage it anymore. It is far beyond our control, and we must seek a different path that contains a fuller understanding of how we are to live as people of faith in the world and how we are to love our neighbors. There's no answers right now. There's no rushing into this. There's no pretending that somehow, some way, I'm the best role model and I've got all the right answers, or I just need to emulate one particular guy and everything will be solved. Rather, I feel like we as men are being invited into conversation. Conversations about how our faith can make us whole, to echo the Samaritan's words. How can I be the person that I am called to be? How can I teach my son and my daughter? What can I say to my spouse? It is in the asking of questions like these where I now find my community. It is up to me, it is up to all of us to say, I need help. Many of us need help. Jesus, please make us whole. May God's peace be with you. Amen.